good evening to you all. Today, we're going to talk about the fifth episode on Surah Yusuf, titled Tell Us About 7 Fat Cows. And the king said, I see 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 lean ones, and 7 green ears of corn and others that are dry. O assembly, explain to me my dream if you can interpret dreams. The meaning here is that the king of Egypt, whose name was Al-Walid ibn Rayyan, saw a dream in his sleep, but this dream startled, disturbed, and frightened him greatly, and its interpretation was confusing to whom? To his people. So, what did the king say, or what was the dream that he saw in his sleep? He told them, I see in my dream 7 weak, emaciated cows. 7 of them, weak and skinny, and they were eating 7 fat cows. Meaning, the weak ones were eating the fat ones, those fat cows. Those valuable cows were swallowed up by the weak ones until they completely disappeared. In his dream, he couldn't see any trace of the fat cows, they were completely swallowed by the skinny cows. The skinny ones. And then he said to them, I also saw in my dream 7 dry ears of grain that twisted themselves around 7 green ears and covered them up as well. So interpret this for me. Folks, he was talking to the nobles around him. Some people say he wasn't talking to the nobles, but rather to the magicians around him. So the king is speaking to the magicians or the nobles around him. He says, Find me an interpretation for what I saw in my dream about the cows and the ears of grain, if you are able to interpret such things. My source for the entire story of Surah Yusuf, from A to Z, is Majma al-Bayan fi Tafsir al-Quran by al-Tabasi. The question here is, it says, and the king said. Who is saying this? Who is talking about the king and saying, and he said, it's the king. Who is talking about him here in the third person? The clarification here also says, and the king said, so the statement here is not from God. The statement is from the king, but the narration is from God. They said, these are confused dreams, and we are not knowledgeable in interpreting dreams. The meaning here is that the nobles or the group of magicians around King Al-Walid ibn Rayyan told him, all your dreams are false and just imaginations, and we do not know any interpretation for them. The important thing is, their lack of knowledge in interpreting the king's dream was a main reason for what? For Joseph's release from prison. Why? Because the one who was saved from prison, the one who had seen his dream and told it to Joseph in prison, saying, I saw myself pressing wine. If you remember well, this man went to the king and said, Pay attention, your majesty. I was, along with a friend of mine, in prison with Joseph, and we told him our dreams. I told him my dream, and my friend told him his dream, and he interpreted both dreams, and his interpretation turned out to be 100% correct. And he said, Your Majesty, I ask your permission to go to the prison to meet Joseph and tell him about the dream you saw, and ask him for its interpretation, then come back and tell you what he says. The word they said, who is speaking here? That's the question now. Who is talking about the magicians or the nobles around King Al-Walid ibn Rayyan? Who is referring to them in the third person and saying they said, meaning they said as in those people? The point here is also about the word itself. They said means that those who spoke were the nobles or magicians who were around King Al-Walid ibn Rayyan, and God knows best. And the one who was saved of the two and remembered after a while said, I will inform you of its interpretation, so send me forth. The meaning is that the man who was with Joseph in prison and was saved, the one who used to press wine. He is saying, I remembered what Joseph asked of me after a long time since I left prison. Why? Because it was Satan himself who made him forget the request of Joseph. Why? Because Joseph relied on this person, not God. God's punishment, meaning for Joseph that he depended on people and did not depend on God. But in any case, the important thing is that the one who was saved from prison, after he remembered Joseph's request, and what was Joseph's request in this situation? He told him, go tell the king that I am imprisoned unjustly. Maybe, just maybe, he will release me. That's the story. So this man remembered Joseph when the king told his dream and couldn't find anyone to interpret it. So he said to them, guys, send me to Joseph in prison so I can ask him about the king's dream interpretation. The point to note here is the word, and he said. Here, who is the one speaking about the one who was saved from prison? And the question here is, and he said, who is the speaker about the one who was saved from prison, using the third person pronoun? The point to note here, and he said, meaning the statement is from the one who was saved from prison, but the narration is from God. The word far saloon at the end here has a rhyme. And you'll notice that the next verse also ends in the same tone or in a similar way. It also has a rhyme. Joseph, O truthful one, tell us about 7 fat cows eaten by 7 lean ones, and 7 green ears of corn and others that are dry. Perhaps I may return to the people so that they may know. The meaning here is that the one who was saved from prison went and met Joseph in his prison and asked him about the interpretation of the king's dream. Why? Because the king himself was unable to interpret it, as were the priests around him, or the magicians, or the nobles, or anyone else. That is, they also failed to interpret it. He told him, perhaps the king will appreciate your knowledge and release you from prison. So when Joseph heard the king's 2 dreams, he said to him, look, the 7 lean cows and the 7 dry ears of corn. These represent the years of drought and famine. As for the 7 fat cows and the 7 green ears of corn, those are the years of abundance and blessing. The point to note here is that the speaker is the one who survived prison, and he is talking to Joseph in his cell, saying, Joseph, my friend, let me ask you, interpret this and that for me. So the statement is from the one who survived prison, and the narration is to God. The second point to note is that he says, honestly, I don't really understand the use of perhaps I. Then he goes back and says, perhaps I will return, perhaps they will know. Does this mean there's doubt about his return? And is there also doubt that the people will know? He said, you will sow for 7 consecutive years, and whatever you harvest, leave it in its ear, except for a little which you eat. The meaning here is that Joseph is sending them a message, telling them to plant for 7 consecutive years all in a row, but to plant with diligence, hard work, and effort, and to leave the crops in their ears. Don't grind it. Except for the portion you need to eat just to sustain yourselves, that's the only part you should grind. Meaning, you take the amount you need, grind it, eat it, and leave the rest in its ears so that it doesn't get infested with weevils. The question here also asks, who is speaking about Joseph in the third person? The clarification is that the statement is from Joseph, but the narration is from God. Notice the word you eat as well, both in this verse and the previous ones. That is, the previous verse ended with they know, and the one before that with send me. Notice the rhyme at the end of the verses. Then there will come after that 7 hard years that will consume what you have stored up for them, except for a little of what you preserve. The meaning is clear. Joseph continues, saying that after you plant for 7 years, there will come upon you 7 years of drought, famine, and poverty. During those 7 years of poverty, you will consume what you stored up in the previous 7 years. The verse is about blessing and agriculture. A note here, the speech is still Joseph's, but the narration is from God. Another point to note is that the word tatanen, you preserve, also maintains the rhyme scheme found in the previous 3 verses. Then after that will come a year in which people will be given relief and in which they will press wine or oil. The meaning is that Joseph is still continuing his interpretation of the vision in the verse. The king says that after those 7 years of drought, famine, and hardship, there will come a year in which people will be saved from the famine, and they will press grapes, olives, and sesame. The information that comes in verse 49 is actually news that was not mentioned before at all. This is extra information that the king did not see, did not mention in his dream, and did not even ask Joseph about. But God revealed it to the prophet Joseph so that it would be an additional proof of what? Of his prophethood. To confirm his prophethood. The note here also consists of 2 points. The speech here is still Joseph's, and Joseph is still continuing. That is, the statement is from Joseph, and the narration is from God. The second point in the note is that there is a commitment at the end of the verse to the rhyme Yasirun. And the king said, "Bring him to me." So when the messenger came to him, Joseph said, "Go back to your master and ask him about the women who cut their hands. Indeed, my lord is well aware of their scheming." When the king heard Joseph's interpretation, what did he say? "Bring me Joseph, get him out of prison." So the important thing is that this survivor from prison was happy and went back to Joseph in his prison. He said to him, "Come with me. The king has decided to release you from prison. Come so you can meet the king." But Joseph refused. He said, "I'm not leaving prison until my innocence is proven." Go back to your master, the king, or your lord, meaning your master the king, and ask him. Tell him, "Your Majesty the king, please ask the women who cut their hands while they were slicing fruit. If you remember that story, they injured their hands because of how handsome he was. And those women plotted against me," meaning they lied about me, so that the king himself will know that I am innocent. But I won't leave because of a pardon from the king, as if I were guilty and he was pardoning me. No, he must know I was imprisoned unjustly and I am innocent. When he asks those women and finds out the story was fabricated, the story of my imprisonment, and that I was imprisoned unjustly. The question here is, who is speaking about the king in the third person and saying, "And the king said"? The second point is that the statement here is from the king, but the narration is from God. Notice here that this is the start of a new rhyme, which is the word all-knowing. Why? Because in the next verse, you'll find a rhyme at the end of the verse with the same thing, truthful. He said, "What was your affair when you tried to seduce Joseph?" They said, "God forbid. We know of no evil against him." The wife of Al-Aziz said, "Now the truth has come to light. I tried to seduce him, and he is surely among the truthful." The meaning here is that the messenger left Joseph in prison carrying the intense revolution and great anger that Joseph felt, and he said, "I will not leave with a pardon from the king." He insisted, "I have to get out only after it is known that I am innocent." Anyway, he went back and said, "Your Majesty, here's the thing. Joseph is asking you to summon the women, including the wife of Al-Aziz, and ask them whether I am innocent or not. The important thing is, the king didn't waste any time and called for the women. He asked them, was Joseph really wronged, or did he actually have any intentions toward you? They replied, on the contrary. They all answered, we have not known him to be unfaithful, and he did nothing of what he was accused of, nor did he ever try to seduce us. And this man is innocent and imprisoned unjustly." Then Lady Zuleika raised her hand to the king and said, "I want to speak." He told her, "Go ahead." She said, "I admit that I lied, and that I tried to seduce him, and that Joseph is indeed truthful. Here's the important note." He said, "The king, is there someone talking about him?" He said, "It is him." And then we said they, meaning the women. And then she said to the wife of the Aziz, "So if someone is talking about the three in the third person, who is it?" The second point is that the statement is for the king, the women, and Zuleika, and the narration is for God. Notice that there is also a commitment to rhyme in this verse. The word "the truthful" was in the previous verse. If you pay attention, of their plot is knowing. And in the next verse as well, you'll find the plot of the betrayers. That is so he may know that I did not betray him in his absence, and that God does not guide the plot of the betrayers. The meaning here is that Joseph is telling the messenger he's still elaborating to the man who survived prison, the one who acts as the link between him and the king. Yes, here's the connection between them. He tells him, so that the king knows I did not betray the Aziz with his wife in his absence. The point to note here is that Joseph is speaking about himself in the first person, saying I. The second point is that there's also a commitment to rhyme here, and he says the traitors. Notice here that the words are still Joseph's, but the narration is from God, and I do not absolve myself. Indeed, the soul is ever inclined to evil, except those upon whom my Lord has mercy. Truly, my Lord is forgiving, merciful. The meaning is that Joseph is saying, I do not claim innocence from what humans do, but I refrained from committing sin by God's guidance, not my own doing. People say, no, this statement I do not absolve myself is not Joseph's. It's not Joseph who says, I do not absolve myself. The soul is ever inclined to evil. So who is it? Some say, no, it's the wife of Al-Aziz who says, I don't absolve myself of lying about Joseph, because the soul is inclined to evil. So, we don't know the truth. Is this verse spoken by Joseph or by the wife of Al-Aziz? The point being made here, I do not absolve myself, regardless of whether the speaker is Joseph or whether the speaker is Zuleika. According to other commentators, the statement could be from either Joseph or Zuleika, but the narration is from God. The second point, actually, is the repetition of the word my Lord twice. I think if we removed the second my Lord and replaced it with the pronoun him, if we said, except whom my Lord has mercy on, for he is forgiving, merciful, it would still convey the meaning. And the king said, bring him to me. I will select him for myself. So when he spoke to him, he said, indeed, today you are established and trusted in our presence. The meaning. When the king realized Joseph's innocence, he ordered that Joseph be brought so he could become his advisor in managing the affairs of his kingdom. And the king said to him, meaning, he told him, today you have status and standing with me, your word is effective, and your authority is part of my authority. The point to note here is that, and the king said, meaning, the statement is from the king, but the narration is from God. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in another episode.